good tools, adequate tools for running in elections and for fulfilling their function. Of course, it's an individual issue, but in systemic terms, I think that political parties could contribute. It's not your first election, so what helped you most? What kind of knowledge would be most useful? How can we educate politicians like you? And what was the most important thing once you got elected? And for you, Magda, the following question now. The Leader School is holding a whole series of trainings for candidates. So what kind of support we should give to such people? So what is a leadership model at the Leader School? What kind of image should we get? Okay, I will first answer the question that you did not ask, but that was implied in your statement. It was presented here. Okay, so who teaches politicians? The state, parties, NGOs, all of these, in my case. Why? NGOs, for me, the most important is a Federation of Fighting Youth. At the end of the 1980s, we were not nice guys. We did not throw flyers at policemen. We threw something else, and ever since I've had a dream about a strong Poland rooted in the European Union. Later on, I could say the political party, you may be surprised, the beginning of the 1990s, radical youth. In the presidency, I supported Lech Wałęsa because I wanted to remove the communists, in which we didn't have the Congress of Liberal Democratic. I worked with Porozumienie Centrum party, and Mr. Kaczyński thought I was the hope of his party, so I left the party and I cut off my development path with political parties. And in 1997 I became advisor, personal secretary of Prime Minister Buzek, and it was the greatest school for me. I was 20-something-year-old at the Prime Minister's office. It was the most forming. Worked with local leaders, political leaders, not only in the sense of members of parliament, but also for officials, activists, people involved in a variety of think tank activities. And we believe that a good leadership, good politics is made when it is made not only within my own bubble. If I convince those who are already convinced, great, but I should be able to go beyond that. And indeed, we had a school of leaders for civic society, and we decided we need to tell people that we would want to get people who are interested in politics. A big challenge, because different companies and organizations said, okay, we would be more willing to help you work with civic society rather than politics. But for the past 10 years we've been open about this, that we deal with politics, and over the past 7 years we've been able to invite members of parliaments to meet in a different environment.
As participants, yes, so elections are always an interesting time for us, because many people at that time get prepared to their new function. Currently we have around 120 people who have been with our program, and they are candidates to the parliament, to be elected members of parliament, what do they need? They need support, they need knowledge, because these are usually people, I'm not speaking of you, Krzysztof or Marek, who already are in the system. You are there, you are active, you know how to do it. But people who have this ambition, who have this dream, they are on the list of their political party, and they want to fight for Poland of their dreams. But they lack knowledge, they lack support. They know the tactics, they know that they should have flyers and banners and place them, but they have no strategy. They don't know who's going to vote for them, where, maybe something else than the flyers. So what's difficult, and what we hear of people taking part in our parliamentary training, and we had 2 courses, and open for men and for women, and the other one dedicated only to women. What is mainly discussed, what we mainly hear, is that I am on the list in parliamentary elections and I have to cope with it by myself. The fund of 5% of the budget of the political party is not used at all to improve the knowledge of these people. Well, there is education, but politicians often stay in their bubbles at the level of young members, but also older ones. So it's more of indoctrination rather than education. Marcin, why it is so difficult to get out of your bubble and listen to arguments and statements that you disagree with? Why do we avoid such debate? Anya, maybe you start. Why is it difficult to go out of your bubble? Yeah, because it's hard. It's just hard. Well, I think that within last 8 years, we got polarized. Really, well, if we that's obvious, as when contemplating that it's a nice hot day. Well, so we can question and challenge anything. Well, 20 million people across the world, they believe that the earth is flat. And it's nice to be within your own bubble, because you don't have to challenge anything. It's comfortable. You don't have to question anything. And we need some comfort, because there are some fronts on which you wage your war, or different wars. That's why it's hard to get out of your bubble. And to me, the school of political leaders was a total going out of my bubble. I didn't really realize how far-reaching it was. During our first meeting, I shared a room at the hotel with a member of parliament representing the Peasants' Party. I would probably have never met her. Most people were people from the local government, and I've been living in Warsaw for 14 years, but I had no idea of the problems that they face. So suddenly you are faced with people who have practical experience in different areas. So to me, it was a huge going out of my bubble, but I felt relieved. And I could see that there are more things that join us than divide us. And when you graduated from this School of Leaders, how often do you get out of your bubble? I'll give the floor to you, Marcin. Well, referring to your first introductory statement. Before you ask the question, you said that political education or civic education should target people aspiring to political or public functions. I think that this assumption is wrong, because I believe that civic education should target all people, whether they have any political ambitions or not. When I started at the local authorities, I had no knowledge and experience. I would like to share with you my German experience. That's in line with my oppositional stance. But I spent many years in Germany, and their political education results from what happened in Germany as a result of the First and Second War. And that shaped the educational system, which was to bring up citizens to be active citizens, to tell them what political parties are about, what communities are about, and of course these are different circumstances, but the fact that they have something like the federal center of civic education or political education, that was something which right now, under the democratic crisis in Poland, in Europe and across the world, to explain why some countries are doing better in this area and some and some other perform less well. But of course, this is quite a expanded system of education, from publications through training courses, workshops. And I'm not sure whether you know, but in Germany, each citizen, there is a central unit at the federal level and in the landers, where every German, not even German citizen, but a person living in Germany, has the right to make to receive 5 publications every quarter that they receive for a symbolic amount of 3-4 euro. For example, the history of Poland, Polish-German relations. Then if we could get that almost for free, the political consciousness or awareness would be much better. Suddenly, at the level of university, I clashed with my colleagues who represented a completely different system of values. And suddenly, I had to get engaged in a discussion about what we have in common. And this experience, as Anya said, that my conclusion was that you can communicate with other people. After graduating from the School of Leaders, I don't see any platform for that, because we don't talk to each other, we don't have debates, we don't have public discussions. And now again, I'd like to come back to the reality of Germany, Switzerland, or Austria. That is countries that I know. The public discourse in any subject, be it political, social, or economic issue, takes place in public media, where you can hear experts representing different views, and they work out a compromise which reflects the overall situation or opinion or of an average German, Swiss, or Austrian. Experts create the debate, but that doesn't happen in Poland. You don't listen to experts. This discourse is imposed by politicians, and there are no arguments, but kind of dehumanizing your opponent, and the debate is impossible. Do I get out of my bubble at the level of local authorities? It's very difficult, because it has got highly political in big cities.
Tak sobie pomyślałam, że w pełni.
I have just one thought here. Couldn't agree more that we should provide some political education since childhood, but we would like to invite young people to activism and to action rather than thinking and contributing to decisions, because we have some youth boards We have some youth organizations at school, so they are asked to organize something, for example, provide bulletin boards and evaluate it, but young people are not invited to make decisions about the fate of schools, about the fate of cities. Also, youth organizations and parties also work like that. They distribute flyers rather than, or leaflets, rather than contributing to decisions. So when you think about political activity, it's about action rather than thinking. It's difficult to be a politician or on a national or a local scale, and that knows what to do. And even if you want to drive a forklift in a warehouse, you need to have a special certificate, and you get to a parliament without any certificates. Well, there are some mechanisms that political parties could implement. We cannot impose this in a systemic way, but they could look for it themselves. Now, there is a mechanism of mentoring that we use in our programs, and for different political candidates, even for members of parliament, we are offering this kind of mentoring. Now, gentlemen, you have been active politicians for quite some time. Now, what do you think about this kind of mentoring of or accompanying younger people by people with greater experience, or in local governments? Does it make any sense, or perhaps it would be wouldn't make much sense because of the rivalry in politics, but perhaps we should employ experts from the outside rather than politicians. Now, okay, speaking about politicians, you don't need to have competences to be elected to the parliament. You need to have the votes of voters. So we had Donald Tusk, who worked as an upholsterer, but Donald Tusk did not got elected by himself. It was people who elected him. Also, Kaczynski was elected for Law and Justice Party. Now, sometimes we make very easy choices. Speaking in euphemistic terms, now in terms of mentoring, master-disciple relationship, tutor, well, it's pretty difficult to implement in a party. You need to be very lucky to find someone like that. This is what I said in my opening speech. If I were to look for someone in my social political life who was my mentor, I think it was indeed Jerzy Buzek, who I still extremely respect for his way of understanding the state. I'll never forget our conversation in 1997, soon after the elections we won. We were discussing how to introduce more layers of local development. We had analysis from Professor Kulesza, Stępień, so on and so forth. Now we understood we had to have strong provinces, because without them we wouldn't be able to effectively distribute funds from the European Union. Okay, analysis was correct, but our main sociologist came, Tomasz Żukowski. Right now he's one of the sociologists and analysts for law and justice. Yes, it's true, but it is political suicide, because we had to eliminate 40-something provinces. Initially thought about 12 provinces, 16 Okay, okay, Koszaliński province lost. Okay, let's not incite local emotions, but this was a way of thinking about state where the interest of the state won over party interest, because all those who were specialists on election results decided that we're going to pay a dramatically high price for that. And indeed, it was true. There were a lot of actions or protests in cities which were on the border of gaining the status of gaining provincial status. Okay, later on I conducted some verification of justices and judges according to very clear criteria, of course, and Tusk told me, okay, there are protests here, and Justitia brought about protests, and I told Justitia, okay, once you're going to get a Minister of Justice that will give criteria that will really knock you off your shoes. And Donald Tusk said, okay, you're inciting protest. And I said, okay, no professional occupation likes to be evaluated, and of course judges don't like it either. And we either implement the necessary change, and it will cause discussions and protests, or we will be in limbo. So generally the lesson from government, we can say that reform doesn't pay, because you pay a very high political price. Both AWS and Union of Freedom didn't enter the parliament in 2001. So 2001, with the negative consequences, I still think it overshadows politics, because all the changes implemented by Law and Justice, no reform. Okay, this is only about the redistribution of public funds. I'm not even saying whether it's good or bad. They should be evaluated individually. But there haven't been any systemic changes other than taking away competences from the local governments, because it's a certain way of thinking. It's all about the centralization of authority and one-party rule.
Mistrz uczeń.
I will come back to the question about the relationship between a mentor, master, and a student. Well, I'm not that old. I have only 5-year experience in the local authority in politics, but this master-student relation is known to me from the academic world. Sometimes they are accidental relationships. Something brings two people together, and if I look at my relationship with mentors from Germany and from the United States, it was based on trust and the fact that the mentor is at a different level than the student or than his disciple, and of course there is no competition and rivalry between them, and it's in politics it's different. Well, of course, for you, between you and Prime Minister Buzek, it was also different. But if I could tell you who is my role model for a local authority person, I would say that this is our mayor, the mayor of our city, Zdanowska, who has for many years been able to bring people together and to try and combine different interests and different political actors. And in all this political chaos that we have in Poland, which is a place where we can still talk to one another. And she probably from the time perspective, I will be able to call her my mentor. This is something that gets built up over time. This is about building a relationship that is tested in difficult situations. And coming back to your first questions, when you start, where you enter the world of politics, you may know nothing, but that you get a lesson, and I was taught a lesson not a long time ago. Well, it depends, because leaders can grasp the reality, and then they go into politics and they learn from their mistakes. But can we help you to know what you are supposed to do? Well, the MPs who were new MPs in the present term, they were telling us, and that they were our leaders, and they were telling us that it was a nightmare. Of course, they got a roadmap how they should navigate across the parliamentary buildings. There are trainings or in-house trainings for the new MPs, but the only hope is that that in political parties there are MPs who still remember what it was like when they were fresh in the parliament, and but they were never prepared by the system to play any kind of role of a mentor. But I understand your story, that somebody who becomes a councillor in the local authorities, and suddenly you preside over the council, and I would dream of a country where the president of the local council, when he or she is elected, they know what they should do. Well, you grow up to perform a certain function or role, of course, but it seems that the parties can do it better. The young, the divisions of political parties for youngsters, they just don't work. Then they are instrumentally treated by. But listen how it sounds. Well, my first time in the local authority, my first time in the parliament. Adding on to what Magda has said, well, of course, you grow up to perform a certain role or function. You get the tools and instruments to perform your function. But I don't think it was you, Krzysztof, but I discussed the new MPs in the parliament, and where in Germany they have mentors, experienced MPs who introduce them into the parliamentary work. But there is a kind of system like that. But of course, if you look at how the state operates, I often refer to German examples. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to develop new training systems. There are models which are universal, which just have to be translated into our Polish conditions. And this is also a feature of this political area and language area. Not a single government after 1989 has ever thought of political education that would explain the relations at the regional level, local level, and up to the European level, for people to make informed choices when they go to the polls. And that's what we don't have. And I think that this reflection should be present. We should reflect upon it. We should have reflected upon it in Poland already some time ago. Not speaking of political parties or anything that we see as threats to democracy in Europe and across the world. Yeah, I wanted to say something because agree and disagree with what you are saying, because I got my political experience and education in the streets and in acting, in what I was doing. Well, political education it doesn't fit my experience. This political education to me is not an education that you can get in political parties. We don't have any political education at schools, and I believe that this is the place, because there are people who don't know what to do with a ballot, and there are many women who don't have any political opinions, and they vote as their partners or husbands tell them. But politics decides about everything, and if people make a division between politics and everyday life, I strongly disagree, because everything is political. Maybe these chairs are not political, but air, water, everything is political. I accumulated my political experience in the streets. I think that the Law and Justice has done the most for political education in Poland. I can't understand why we are not all united, but what Magda has said, and this is the subject often tackled by women, dialogue and communication, which we don't have in Poland. We can't do that. Well, of course, we can tell stories of the past, and all the time we say, well, the system doesn't work, but we are the system as well. We are parts of the system. I would like to ask you what you have done in your years of being active in politics, what you have done to change it. Well, we can keep on repeating that the system doesn't work. I'm a self-made man. I learned myself everything, and I was taught by Buzek, by Prime Minister Buzek, but young people will not follow into our footsteps. Today I am a supporter of prefigurative culture. I am 42, and my mentors are 20. And they come from the east. Today we have to learn quickly with them. The time is running much faster than when we were growing up. They do things faster. Why here in the freedom games, the panel for young people was somewhere there at the top, and on the main stage there was Leszek Balcerowicz. Well, come on, we should give voice to people to whom we are preparing the world. Well, let's stop creating ghettos. Well, just go there to this small room, to this panel, only young people, nobody cares. We are trying to think of different cooperation models, give them names, put them into separate drawers, but the world doesn't look like that today. It's much more complex, much more diverse. It's not binary anymore, it's multi-level. We are bombarded with information, within one day, with information that our grandfathers could get over their entire lifetime. And this is, and I learn from younger people who work with me in the East Initiative. Even if I can't get out of my bubble, of course, I have these possibilities. I don't not always use them properly, but I want to do it, and I think I can do it, because to me, and what people from the East say, well, this is, humans are the most important. I can talk to anyone, of course, as long as they are not aggressive, and I can. And we can try and talk to everyone instead of saying that, well, I have this ID, I have this badge, and so go away because I'm more important than you are. We should invite everybody to sit at the table. When these young women went on stage and said, well, Balcerowicz must go, they were assessed as those who are not competent enough. They don't have enough knowledge that they know what or who Mr. Balcerowicz is, but they are fighting against the climate change. They have experiences. They have also suicidal experiences, either they're individual or related to people around them. They fight for better world around us, but that's incredible how many things we have in common. I am 42 and I cannot have legal abortion, and they are 20 and they don't have the right to legal abortion as well. Where were you at that time?
Now, I'd like to address what you said. As you mentioned us, there is no quarrel between us. From the point of view of some people, what we do, sometimes we do too slowly. And we said, okay, I was the first president of the Supreme Chamber of Control, who appointed the first woman to be a deputy chairman. So this shows a kind of a deformation of public institutions in Poland. I was the first chairman who appointed a special advisory board to advise me on social issues, especially animal rights, and we started to control animal pounds and so on and so forth, animal shelters. So when we talk to politicians, they use, for example, they use polls, and okay, the voting attendance is by a third lower among the youngest. So if they prepare offering for older people, it's less costly politically than for young people. Young people ask questions, they have doubts. Politicians take the easy way. Now, when I was a chairman of the Supreme Chamber of Commerce, I could not participate in political life, but I have attended all women's strikes and also in Łódź, and similarly to President Andrzej Duda, I believe that I'm still learning and I'm going to evolve with my views. But if you ask me what to do for politicians to listen to you, you must prove that you can have an influence over politicians. So you need to show that you want to make choices, of course. There's a variety of schools. For example, in Central Eastern Europe, there was a party that represented the young people. I'm not sure. Fidesz. In Hungary, when was it created? In 1989. That was a party representing 20-year-old people, and Viktor Orbán was a fresh blood in Hungarian politics. But ever since, no other party like that was created in Hungary or Poland. And look at the women's strike several years ago, and today politicians look at polls and they see, okay, the frequency of voting women is lower than men, and so the politicians draw conclusions from that. Do you know why so few people vote? Because they don't feel agency. They don't. They feel they are not heard. Okay, they can, of course, protest again, go out in the street, but they don't think it will be effective. Okay. Okay, so tell me, who represents me in the Senate Pact, or among the leaders of all parties? Who is my representative as I see 10 gentlemen on the picture? Magdalena Biejat. Once we talk about women in politics, we have a great example. In some parties, they have parities. In some parties, they have some alternating mechanism. I disagree with women's strike. I think it was a formative experience also for many men who changed their minds on abortion. So we have an opportunity to support women. Even if on the Democratic side, only in certain parties, I think that right now there are a great number of very good candidates. We're offering a course with the Battery Foundation for female candidates, and Anya and Magda, you can tell something about it, why it is absolutely important today to elect as many female members of parliament. Right now it's 28%, even less than the quota law that assumes 35%. So why is it the case that why it is the case that it's so important to encourage women to run for offices and to be elected? My answer is very simple, because the world is diverse and we need a representation of both sides, both males and females. And the parliament who would like to talk to one another and present their points of view and reach a compromise or consensus about how our world should be arranged in Poland and in Europe. It's not the case that there's a shortage of female candidates. We know a lot of women who wanted to run for office and who finally didn't make it. I know this also concerns men, and not only females, but a lot of females did not qualify. Okay, we can talk about these alternating mechanisms, so on and so forth. Answering your question, what do they need? I think that Veronika and myself, okay, Veronika is here with us and she supports women in politics. She encourages women to participate. I think they need to believe they're good enough and they can do this and they don't have to prove anything, and that they can sorry, the interpreter cannot hear the speaker.
We've lost the speaker.
That's what.
Być może zdjąć emocje.
So perhaps we should kind of eliminate emotions and stop thinking about who is going to win or lose and consider the system perhaps is just a dream. But we know that in 2011 there was an attempt to develop another system, and perhaps in Germany political foundations could be a solution. Now so many years have passed since then, and there is no discussion about it. Perhaps it will never be there. I don't know. It's quite scary for me that we're going with the current, and this distribution of emotions is there, but it's very difficult for us to stop and talk about the system and we say, okay, yes, we need to be the driving force for reform, and then we get together and discuss who is better, who is worse. It's not only addressed to you. Sorry, perhaps this was triggered by your discussion, but for me it's a sad realization that it's difficult to change a system.
polityczną i co
I will tell you what petrifies the political scene and prevents young people from getting into politics. To me, this is the system of financing political parties and different legal solutions that protect the interests of the political parties. Well, the pact for Senate, because in the Senate there is the representation of women. What kind of ordinance do we have in Poland? It protects the interests of political parties. Well, in our pact for the Senate, we have 98 candidates, but formally we have one candidate who is not a member of any political party of association. This is me, Krzysztof Kwiatkowski, and all political leaders get annoyed with me, and I will tell you why. Because if you have a party logo, even if they don't win in these elections, then they show and provide leverage for the political party, because then they get money for each and every vote on me, but I get this money, but I give it to NGOs, because all the rest candidates use this money that is paid for each and every vote that for them. They get it goes to the fund of the political party. Marcin, Anya, and we will be coming to an end. Well, just to. But a civic candidate must collect signatures twice. Well, in response to what Anya said, when there is no system, we are trying to do things on our own. For example, in our local authorities in Łódź, and I'm really proud of that. For 2 months, in our big conference room of the council, we had young people from the primary, secondary schools. They could come and see how we work. These young pupils, they were coming and they could vote for or against, or go to the rostrum, take the floor, or secondary school graduates who came there and they knew that this time they will be voting for the first time in Poland. They will be voting for the candidates that they choose. There were different questions concerning local authorities in Łódź that are of interest to them, and this is the civic education, but it should be systemic and should be carried out by the state, not at the local authorities level on my own initiative. This should be done regularly. Well, women in politics, to me, it's really very, very important. That's why I also took part in this Girls for Politics program, and that was the first edition. That was a very interesting experience. And why Magda said that we need diversity. I will go even further. We represent 52% of this society. If we are not there at the table, nobody is going to think of our problems. Unpaid work of women representing 20% of GDP. Moms, grannies say, I give up my care work. I don't, because all care system rests on the shoulders of women. because the GDP goes for tanks, rifles. But we have to see that, and we have to see our representatives, such as myself. When I see 7 men, leaders of political parties, who am I to identify myself with? Who can understand the fact that I don't want to get pregnant or that I have a disabled children? 80% of mothers with disabled children, they are left alone. Then they are single parents, they have to fight for the benefits. So, gentlemen, please read about it. And that's why we have to be there, 50-50. I'm not happy with 35%. Let's go for 50%, 52%. That's our proportion in society. Thank you very much. We had an activist perspective, expert perspective, national perspective, local perspective. But I think that we should discuss this education aspect more. We should political education more. We will probably do that after the elections. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for following us on the internet. Anya, Krzysztof, thank you. And I hope that we will continue our discussion.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Każdy wybór ma swoje konsekwencje.
Dziś na kazaniu o takich jak ty mówili, że to morderczynie.
A wiesz, że ta, która ci pomogła, trafi za kraty?
Trzeba mieć sumienie.
Jak mogłaś to zrobić własnej matce?
Aborcja to najgorsza zbrodnia.
Gdybym ja podjęła taką decyzję, nie byłoby cię tutaj.
Organy państwa nie będą przyglądać się temu obojętnie.
Życie i zdrowie kobiety jest najważniejsze.
Stop kryminalizacji aborcji.
Kobieta decyduje.
Pan Zbigniew Hołdys.
Zgadza się. Dla znajomych Zbyszek.
Serio? Zbyszek. Nadchodzące wybory są zbyt ważne, żeby zostawić je bez kontroli. Dołącz do obywatelskiej kontroli wyborów. Zróbmy wybory bez picu.
Jestem z zawodu lekarzem. Zajmowałam się diagnostyką chorób nowotworowych.
W Białorusi zajmowałam się mikrobiologią i molekularną biologią.
Byłem nauczycielem szkoły podstawowej.
Naszym celem jest budowanie umiejętności, które są ważne na polskim rynku pracy.
Szybko nabierają takiej pewności siebie, bardzo szybko się uczą.
Wszystko możliwe, kiedy starasz się.